Hi, I'm Future Alicia. Welcome to episode 4 of Crypto Native. Today I talked to James Waugh of FireEyes about his involvement with DAOs over the last couple of years and where he sees the DAO space going in the future. Thanks for watching. Hey James, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. I'm so excited because, this is only my 4th episode, but to have another Kiwi on the show is a bit exciting for me.
And I think super exciting to be on. I think the amount of Kiwis that are sort of deep down the crypto rabbit hole is one thing, but deep down in Ethereum rabbit hole is even smaller. So super excited to connect.
Yeah, awesome. And okay, you're going to have to forgive me today because I feel like we're going to have a lot of this sensei grasshopper kind of interaction because I feel like you are someone who's been living in DAO land for years, like literally years, right?
Yeah. Basically, since inception of the term, I have been living the life.
Amazing, amazing. And so I kind of like have this visual of you just like sitting in a corner being like, it's going to be like a DAO, like DAOs are going to be now, DAOs are going to be now, DAOs are going to be now. And then was that weird? You would have seen like DeFi Summit and then seen like NFTs. And now I feel, are we there yet? Like, is this a DAO moment?
Well, I mean, I feel like it's been like this continuously. Even in 2019, that was like the year of the DAO was what everyone was talking about, but actually it wasn't. It was sort of like the prelude to the year of DeFi and all of that stuff. So I think it's actually more, NFTs and DeFi are more like, okay, this is a thing now and everyone can understand it, and everyone can use it. And DAOs are sort of more of like a, what's the word? Like miscellaneous term, where actually like what a DAO is and what encompasses a DAO, I think is starting to emerge in NFTs, has already emerged itself in sort of DeFi, and then in that sort of community effort has already emerged itself. And it'll just sort of continue to grow, but less of like a defined, now we have DeFi, now we have NFTs. DAOs will be just like a progressive, everything will become more DAO-y over time, I think.
Yeah, I get this feeling that I think with a lot of things in the crypto space, which is like at first there's this like one-to-one comparison of like this is the Web 2 version, this is the Web 3 version. So say with like companies and limited liability companies, and then like how we can use a DAO structure to mirror that. But that's kind of forgetting, I guess, this like whole first principles approach and like what does this mean for a tool like a mechanism like a DAO to be completely crypto native, like internet native. And I can I want to hear what you have been thinking, because I know that you've been working on lots of kind of DAOs coming that are being launched, especially over the last like 2 years, and then hopefully by the end of this conversation we'll get to some way far out place where I can't even imagine, but I'm excited to head there because I just feel like a DAO is just a really it's like the most wholesome badge of Web3 to me. Like I just think it like encapsulates so many things because it is so broad and diverse as well. And there's so much potential for it to not be contained. I think that's the opportunity. Also might be the headache when you're dealing with it. So I don't know. Yeah, do you just maybe want to run me through some like projects that you've been working on and like what has been really interesting in the last just like couple of months even with how the space has changed again?
Yeah, I mean, I think to sort of the DAO rabbit hole in general, definitely the sort of start of it for me was sort of, the resurgence of it, I guess, was sort of Meta Cartel and all the efforts there. I think, there was the DAO, and that sort of aspired to be the be all end all and the first thing that we're all going to put our money into and all sort of coordinate around, and really set precedent from a smart contract itself. It's like a smart contract is a DAO, right? There's sort of a limited number of people participating. And then thinking about how the DAO evolved from that, and then we sort of, broke ourselves and got, I think Griff Green always calls it PTS DAO, and, we got PTS DAO for a couple of years and we're freaking out about it. And it was really sort of when, Meta Cartel reinvigorated that and lifted everything back off and started, more like first, but then Meta Cartel was the more sort of community version of that. And just basically focused on giving out grants. And that was at a time where thinking about every single token being a governance token, that wasn't really where things were sitting, right? Every single token was different to that, and they were defining themselves as utility tokens, and they were going to reduce fees or do, things like that. And then that sort of, I think Meta Cartel and those other DAO conversations, and, probably writing that we were sort of doing about all tokens turning into DAOs and stuff like that, actually informed where those DAOs ended up going and that growth, that sort of happened to date. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting just how obviously everyone has the best intentions when they're launching a DAO, but given kind of the infancy of the space, how you have to also allow for the ability to adapt and change and kind of get things right. I guess this seems like one of the main advantages in terms of governance with a DAO compared to like the structures that we're used to in kind of the real life world. So maybe can you just like run me through the difference between like a utility token versus a governance token, and like how that has
Yeah, and I think like there's
that
actually
change
tokens
has
that
kind of
sort of
happened.
initially defined themselves as one that pivoted to the other. I mean, I think realistically, all a token is just like a way to coordinate around a product. Like similar to what a share was around like a different company. There's people that really want to back a company or see it come to fruition, or they think it's a good investment, whatever it is, and they can sort of put their money where their mouth is when it comes to that project. And I think a token is the same thing. It's an identical mechanism, but it's actually what that mechanism is, where for the first couple of years there was sort of Maker and DigiX, Waugh as another example, that sort of started really in that decentralized governance-y type of realm. But then for the most part, the majority of tokens from 2017 and 18 were just like, I always describe it like a taco shop. Like I want to make a taco shop, and so I make taco coin, and then if you buy taco coin, you can use taco coin to pay for tacos. And then whenever I get paid taco coin, I sell the taco coins to the markets, and then someone else can come and buy another taco with the taco coin. And like that circle was basically like most tokens. And then I think we realized as a community that what's most valuable about decentralized technologies is that anyone can contribute to them. Anyone can come and sort of play a role in that. And that actually, your Taco Coin saving fees, if someone on the other side of the world has a really good idea that Taco Coin can actually have a new use case, then they should be able to implement that. They should be able to do that. And I think like that's the real, thinking about different parallels to the real world, that's the real difference that I see between like an LLC structure. Co-ops, I think, sort of sit somewhere in the middle there, but certainly compared to like a traditional company structure, that's really the key difference, is that anyone can come and be a participant. Anyone can come in and throw an idea down, and if that idea lands well within that community, then that can actually be implemented. And that's what I think. It was interesting actually. Yesterday we're having a discussion about token surface area and sort of this idea where if you define a token as doing, it's going to reduce fees, and if you stake 100 of them to your profile, you get an extra little badge, and it governs the overall platform, and there's a treasury that's being governed. There's just sort of too many things. And do I want to stake it into my profile and get like a little badge, or do I want to use it inside of governance? And actually, what's cool about governance tokens is that there is a really vast surface area in terms of what governance is of that project and of that treasury and of that token, but it's not the token itself trying to do 17 different things, right? It's that governance itself is 17 different things, and the token can just do that inherently, and doesn't need to have a wide token surface area and to still have that effect and still have that outcome, which I think is compared to the traditional LLC, which is like, I'm the boss, you guys go out and make a shitload of money for me, and when you make a shitload of money for me, I'll give you a bonus of like a trip on a helicopter. Like it's just so different to thinking about how we can build sort of token economies and collectives now, where actually you sort of earn ownership of the DAO, right? You're being rewarded tokens for sort of posting on a forum or contributing different governance ideas, and that is just like so bottom up and actually user centric compared to something like a hire a company to get paid $17 an hour, which I think is a dying concept, or at least I hope.
Yeah, I hope that's dying as well. I'm really looking forward to kind of like citizens of the internet, just like living in the metaverse, interacting with all these different DAOs. Is that already a reality for like quite a few people?
So I think definitely like they are growing. I'd say that's really gone from 0 to 1 or over the past like a year or two. Maybe 18 months. There's been massive growth in terms of those opportunities. I think there's like different ways to do it. Like certainly in terms of thinking about like the art side and the metaverse side, I think those already exist, right? Like the idea of NFTs and digital art, where like talking to I have a shitload of different pieces of digital art, and talking to a bunch of those creators, where actually that is what they're doing, right? They no longer need to be worried about going and finding clients to take photos of their houses. Instead, they can just create a really amazing photo of the stars and then put some animation in it and then sell that as an NFT. And, they really are living that sort of metaverse universe, lifestyle. And I think another really good example of that is like, if you've seen like crypto voxel architects or like Decentraland architects, where like their profession is just their work is to sort of like design amazing creations inside of like crypto voxels or Decentraland and create, massive buildings with cool architecture fully in a decentralized way and sort of like participating in that economy only as a virtual citizen. But on like the sort of more artsy side, I think like
Yeah.
that's really progressed a lot over the past, whatever, 18, 24 months. And those jobs and those sort of revenue streams exist. I think on the more sort of like, and actually on the opposite technical side, I think again, those opportunities exist. Like if you bug bounties, for example, if you can just hack anything, then you can sort of make
Yeah.
a generate constant income from that, or you just get hired from, Paradigm or one of these massive funds that actually just want a galaxy brain, hacker on their team. And so from a really technical, and then there's sort of things like making proposals, right, and actually implementing something, designing a new front end, making a new smart contract, whatever that might be. I think both on the really artsy side and on the really technical side, these opportunities have more or less existed for a couple of years now, and are just progressing, up and up and up. And then I think there's that middle stack, which is really like the sort of what's it like DAO architect, right? There's a better word for it that we were talking about the other day. But you're like an interior designer for DAOs, right? And sort of like that idea. And that you're actually, not just a community engagement where you think about like, I'm replying to Discord and, but actually how are you mapping out that community, right? Like, what do you want to lead calls on? Who do you want to take ownership of calls? Who do you want to empower? Who do you want to make sure that they don't get too much power? Like these types of mechanisms, and that as a role, I think is definitely evolving massively. And thinking like, I don't know if you saw Gitcoin's, one of their latest hires is for like a meme creator, right? It's like a 6-figure job for someone to make memes. And I think, that's actually sitting somewhere in the middle there as well, where like as these DAOs push forward, these people that sit in the middle of technical and super artsy actually become really valuable, whether it's sort of writing or communication or governance itself. Traditional governance has like billions of dollars spent per year all across the world on, the way that governments work and secretaries and, people having assistants and all of these processes that are just around governance. We're actually like, again, on the Gitcoin example, coordinating Akita tokens, which is, I don't know, a dog token, which got Vitalik sent to the Gitcoin multisig, has been this massive exercise, right? And people have put in, tens and tens of hours to get this across the line, where to some people it doesn't matter at all.
Right.
To the Akita community, it matters massively. And somewhere in the middle, you have to have these governance stewards that are just having back and forth conversation and, trying to be hyper transparent about the whole thing.
Yeah.
And actually, them being incentivized, I think, is something really interesting. And, we also did something similar with Balancer around proposal mining, with sort of proposal farming, where basically by voting on a proposal, you would get higher liquidity mining incentives. Stuff like that. We're actually yet to see projects put serious capital behind it. There's been small, contributions and, tens of thousands of dollars. But when you look at projects that are spending millions of dollars per week on liquidity mining, I want to see millions of dollars put out to sort of a proposal, right? And you say, right, for the next month, whoever puts the best proposal towards this project gets $100,000, right? Either in tokens or in dollars. The fact that that hasn't happened yet, I think, is like, more of a bait, and it will actually happen eventually, and more of just the virtue of the times. But, those soft proposals and that governance has as much value as the liquidity, because the liquidity means nothing if the project doesn't evolve and if the community doesn't create new ideas around that. So thinking about how you can really incentivize the shit out of that middle stack, I think, is really, really interesting. And that's definitely where something that FireEye has sort of focused on and wanted to achieve is actually, we don't want to be a consulting DAO, right? That's not the point of it. The point of it is to sort of be a flame and light a governance fire under a given project, and then sort of burn ourselves out purposely, right?
Yeah.
Where actually we can create the mechanisms so that someone who's sitting on the other side of the world in, Poland, who has a really good idea, can submit that idea, get incentivized for it. And actually, it is a better idea than we came up with in the first place, right? Shoot our idea down, put a better proposal up there, get rewarded for the proposal, and then FireEye doesn't need to exist anymore because we've sort of done our purpose of actually, building those incentive mechanisms behind those like community governance-y pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah. So just like what you just said about FireEye, how you kind of like intentionally, you might help a community launch a DAO and think about, like the tokenomics and the incentives and things like that and the governance and how that plays out. And then you intentionally want to burn out. That's a particular kind of person that thinks like that, right? Like, and in a wonderful way, I feel like this Web3 world is full of people who are like that. So I don't know, how do you just want to just like reflect on how that feels like to find a space where you can say something like that and someone's not going to look at you sideways for like all the money you're walking away from or all the power you don't,
Well, and I think it's like super intrinsic to like the Web3 but Ethereum community specifically. I mean, sort of my entire professional career has been in the Ethereum community. Before that I was at university reading about Ethereum till 5 a.m. every night and delivering pizza. Like that was my sort of upbringing, and then, found my professional career here. And it really has been like, I don't know any different, and actually like that idea of, still had conversations with traditional business people and they're like, but I want to make more money. And it's kind of like you just, and it's the optimum, just laughing at them, like, yeah, I'm sure you do. Like, but who cares? Actually, getting more zeros or more numbers in an online bank account, who gives a fuck about? And actually prioritizing on that too much has led to this brutal capitalistic machine that we have. And thinking about how we can, as a younger generation who are digitally empowered and sort of hyper knowledgeable about so many different areas because we didn't have to go to university for 7 years and then go to a London university for another 7 years. Instead, I just spent, a brutal amount of time on the internet learning every day. And there's, hundreds of thousands of these people all over the world. I think it becomes the new paradigm. And that's actually how we build it into the new world, is that it's not, oh, here's a thinking about the example where you have like a young kid, right? And you sort of explain two versions of the future. The first version is what we have, or the traditional way, which is, you start a company and you be a business and you pay everyone as little as possible, and you make sure that the wait lines on whenever you call whenever you call your internet provider, you make sure the wait times are just long enough so that you can maximize on not having employees, but not so long that all the people that call off get pissed off. And you sort of min-max on how to make the most profit you possibly can, and that's the game. Versus you have an open collective of people that are really transparent and actually want to get to the best outcome. And whether it's about, whether sharing money or sharing ownership or sharing governance, sharing power, whatever those mechanisms actually are, if you explain that to someone that's been brought up in a box for 20 years and has no real exposure to the world, it's not like which one's better? It's like one of them's just objectively better for the world and for like your involvement in the world. But it's actually that a lot of the, traditional businesses and traditional ownership of wealth in the world aren't over that line yet, right? And won't be for another 30 odd years or 20 odd years. But similar to, how information is spread, I'm sure libraries were like, oh man, this is shit. The internet's going to be terrible, bad vibe. I want to keep all the information. Well, not necessarily libraries, but, people that had a shitload of information, that were actually quite protective over that. But, sorry, there is a new world now and we will share all of these things.
Yeah. It seems really obvious when you paint the picture like that. And it really seems like people are at the center of DAOs as opposed to profit being at the center of companies. And so just kind of circling back to this idea of governance, how you said, obviously, like today, there is so much money funneled in and around kind of governance as an industry worldwide. And then I almost think that is like such a narrow definition of governance as it exists in the world, like the, what can you call it? Is it like the meat space world, like the Web 2 world? And like the definition of governance, because, my mind just like defaults in the first instance to like political governance of nation states. But I think that governance could have a much broader definition. And so what are these kind of different tangents or surfaces that you've seen governance include in DAOs and just like with people in the space?
Yeah, and I think like definitely +1 to the idea where like, people first, and actually like that's what's been really interesting about seeing the DAO space evolve is like decentralized politics, because you want to make it decentralized. Governance is important and you want many people to play a role in that. But there is still that angle of decentralized politics, right? If 5 people with voting power, you're a lobbyist, right? If you message 5 people saying you should vote this way or you should vote that way, you are lobbying the exact same way that happened in the old world. And that actually, when conflict comes up, right? When conflict comes up in a traditional company, sweet, go and see HR. HR reports to the boss. They talk about the actual problem. HR then reports that back down to the person, and they're fired or a solution's happened or whatever. In decentralized governance, it doesn't work the same way, right? So maybe you have 50 people in a room, and you say, right, well, 22 of them have had a problem with this one person, and only 3 of them are standing up for this one person, while the other 17, don't have an opinion on it. what are we going to do, right? Are we going to delete this person from our DAO? And the way that those conversations take place are like incredibly challenging, right? They're certainly not like, and that's why these traditional governance mechanisms, whether it be of corporate governance or, political governance, that's why these massive structures exist, because it's quite confronting, right? And quite like hard to sort of like have a conversation with someone, whether it be a 1-on-1 or a 20-on-20 or 20-on-1, whatever it is, where you're actually just having to be transparent about the facts. Here's what happened, right? Here's what happened, and here were the outcomes from it, and here's how you made people feel. And this is why you have to either have a serious reform around the way that you're acting or thinking, or exit this community. And so bringing that back to the original question about like, sort of the overlaps of governance, I think, decentralizing political governance, I think, is really important, and something like, I am really into politics and thinking about how, liquid democracy, quadratic voting and things like that can actually take place in our real governance systems. I think really exciting and really interesting, but I think it's further out. I think the political governance is actually, that's a big fish, and there are, if we think the financial beast is big and slow, the political beast is way bigger and way slower. And so sort of, like one bridge at a time, I think. But thinking about how where those other characteristics are that can be decentralized, or, corporate governance, I think, is a really obvious one, and DAOs are doing that. But sort of like NGO or like charity governance, right? And sort of the transparency around those things. The corporate stuff, the DeFi examples of DAOs, I think, are the best example there. The sort of charity stuff, the metacartels and Molochs, and the idea of giving out grants in a really community collective way, and being able to earn your way into those collectives by putting in time and work and energy. And the third one, what was it? The charity. I mean, I think, those two are actually a really good starting point of what I'm starting to decentralize.
I guess if everything starts with a community, right? You might have someone who has an idea, they tweet something out, or they hold an event and people come, and then, or they build a project or a protocol and people start using it. So I guess like communities obviously have really organic starting points, and then growing that to the point where is there like a tension between, is this that decentralized, like is this that accessible or diverse or whatever it is, but it's really just like the organic nature of how the community evolved.
Most of these DAOs that you sort of, it's maybe less in a token format, but certainly in like a grant-giving organization format, or sort of like Metagamma Delta. I don't know if you've seen any of that stuff. The way that these governance work is basically on like a who's doing the work basis. Like if someone's coming in and they're working every day, and there's a new update, and there's a new proposal, and there's a new thing, then, when the governance of these softer communities happens, it's a lot more, you've done the work, you've got the best idea, meritocracy style. I think there really is a different differentiation between the sort of softer community, more focused DAOs and like a token DAO. Like I think in a token DAO, you all have skin in the game, and you all want the thing to be governed. You all hold a random token, which goes up and down on the back of how well you do that, versus those sort of more community DAOs, which actually don't have a token, right? And that, not having a token means that the governance can be more hierarchical, is the wrong word, but sort of more top down, because it's purely just based on who's doing the work, because no one's being paid to do it, right? It's happening out of pure sort of energy. And so from actually both sides, if you're looking in at a community DAO that's run on who did the most work or has the best idea, or a token DAO, which is who has the most tokens based or delegated to them, if you look into either of those organizations, neither of them are that decentralized, right? Which I don't think will change, but they're transparent, right? And them being transparent is the thing that matters. We're really like, if they can continue that transparency and they can maintain that as they scale, that's the thing that'll give them the leg up. And that's the thing that it's very hard to argue against when, if you can just join a group call or join a Discord channel and see the governance going on. It might not, even if it's happening in a medium centralized way, you can at least call things out. And if you see something that, in that transparent stack that you really disagree with, and you make a post or you make a proposal or you make a comment saying that, it's not going to be ignored, right? Someone's going to, if it's, there's proof to it, someone's going to pick up on it and be like, actually, did you see this random comment? Like, this is kind of a fucked up process, or we're making a wrong decision here, or whatever it is. And so it's just the transparency, I think, where actually the governance can still be mostly centralized if it happens through token voting, or even if it happens in a quadratic way, right? If you had a perfect SIB resistant system and we're all participating in it and all voting, the governance is still going to be centralized because it's going to be those lobbying efforts, right? It's going to be, I have a lot of followers on Twitter and I get a big retweets from a bunch of cool people, and then everyone sees my post and my proposal versus someone that actually didn't have that same reach, didn't get the same reach on their proposal, and therefore, didn't get their proposal through. So yeah, it's the centralization will not shift that much, but the transparency will, which makes the governance process more equitable, I think.
Yeah, I just want to better understand tokenomics as an idea, or I don't know what to call it, as an aspect of Web3, because it seems so central to lots of things. How much of it is technical? How much of it is creative? There are spaces in the spectrum which maybe cover economics and philosophy, and then there are so many parts of it. So what are you wrapping your head around to kind of think about where you are when you're launching a DAO, to what the future might look like, and then thinking of all the human interactions that might have to happen in between? What are those topics? What can I maybe read up on that will help me better understand this?
Yeah, and I think definitely is a crazy word, right? I think the word tokenomics was harvested out of 2017, 18, and there was a million people in the world that were oh, I do tokenomics. It's what do you do? Well, I make taco coins, and I make shitloads of taco coins, and it's okay, fine, really great at it. I think from my perspective, it actually really depends on the project. I would say there's, in terms of the deep technical elements of coding it up, we're not doing any of that. That I would sort of leave that to the actual teams or whoever's going to actually build that up. But in terms of the token itself, I think there's two main elements to it. There's sort of the more community-centric governance-y token. There's going to be a treasury and there's going to be a product with a long tail, right? And sort of how do we make this product the best that we can with this community and with this token? And that's over here. And then there's sort of deeper, more technical things. So Rocket Pool or Aave as an example of that. So both of those teams we worked really closely with. And which example is better? Maybe Aave. And so yeah. So Aave have a safety module, and that safety module you deposit your Aave tokens into, and then they act, and then you get incentives for sort of depositing them into the safety module, and then by depositing them in, they act as a final backstop for the Aave protocol, right? And so thinking about what percentage of those tokens in the safety module can be slashed at any given time, right? What's the minimum and maximum that you want to put into it? Is there an unwind period or a lock period where after you put them into the protocol, you can't take them back out of the protocol? Things like this, where, and Rocket Pool is another example, which is sort of decentralized ETH staking that's probably going to launch pretty shortly, and thinking about sort of having the tokens as the underlying collateral. For most of these more economic games, it's where the token acts as a collateral format in some different way inside of it. So that might be ensuring it against a smart contract attack in the sense of Aave, or an economic attack Aave, or a smart contract actually breaking. In the sense of Rocket Pool, it's is a given node going to sort of defraud the network, or is a node going to fail, and who takes on the user side risk for that, right? So if I deposit my ETH to Rocket Pool and then the node that I deposit it to ends up being a shitty node, I don't want to be the one having to wear that loss, and instead their sort of economic stake into the network should be the thing ensuring that I don't get screwed over. And so there's sort of those more economic games, which are basically around collateral and, how many tokens are going to be deposited, what's the total market cap of tokens versus how big the protocol can grow, and sort of math like that. And then there's sort of doesn't need to be as mathy because there's a lot more sort of governance-y, I guess. And that's sort of the Gitcoin example where there is that, there's that shared care or shared, collectivism of let's make open source funding better, right? Let's make Ethereum better. Let's make Web3 better, whatever it is. That everyone that got retroactively dropped those tokens has already participated in that game, right? They already care about those outcomes. And I think that's what places the Gitcoin launch in a really specific category as compared to any other retroactive distribution or any other, token distribution as a whole. Already you have a real distribution of people that care about the space and care about the issue. And so thinking about how you sort of what that token needs to do, in 10 years' time, the whole Gitcoin platform can be decentralized, and the Gitcoin token could act as a collateral so that your node that's running the Gitcoin website, if it goes down, you get slashed. Sure, there's things there that could happen in a purely economic way. But for that meantime, over the next couple of years, it's really just about putting forward excellent ideas, whether it be technical or non-technical to drive forward the Gitcoin platform. Thinking about decentralizing those matching rounds, right? And what are the allocations that go out to people, where previously that was done by the Gitcoin core team, now that can be done by the community. And so really what I'm thinking about token economics, I think, the positioning of them in the market is just basically behavioral economics. Where's the market currently at, and what's the token going to do inside of that current market? How's it going to be framed and pitched to that audience? And then it's that breaking down versus, and some tokens do set up in both camps as well, but really breaking them down is this like a collateral mechanism that's going to protect the system? And, whenever you stake a token, there needs to be a slashing event. Anytime that you're staking a token and you get more rewards because the token's staked, you've gone back to, Taco coin or something pretty close to Taco coin pretty quickly. And so thinking about, the tokens being staked and that being a protective mechanism for the system, or thinking about it just being sort of a long tail, how do we build this into a better product, and how do we leverage the community we have around us, and have a token to build that community.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So from like maths to behavioral economics, and from like governance to like more the economic end of the spectrum. Yeah, cool. And so what are just like some DAOs that maybe you with FireEyes haven't been like directly involved in, or maybe you have, but that you're just really excited that when you saw them launch or kind of come into the world?
Yeah, so I mean, there's like some of them that we are involved with, but I think, personally, I'm like not actually overly that involved day to day now, but Callum, who we work really closely together here in Christchurch, and like Metacartel Ventures, I think Metacartel Ventures is the DAO. That's exactly what the DAO aspired to be. And certainly, like, I remember being in the Slack of the DAO and talking to Griff, being like, oh my God, there's so many great ideas, the DAO can invest in this and do this and do this. And then it like fell apart and didn't quite get the same impact that we were going for. And so thinking about Metacartel Ventures really being, that end game, where actually it's only a subset of people, but even having 100, DeFi founders from around the space and access to all of their deal flow, right? Access to all of their due diligence and all of their contacts, and just the way that can coordinate compared to like a traditional VC or a traditional investment company, you're blown out of the water, right? There's no way that you can compete with that just because of the network of everyone that's involved. And so I think Metacartel Ventures is like and the Lao is a similar example as well. The Lao is like a consensus version of Metacartel Ventures, I guess. But both of those projects have been, really pushed the ball forward and actually bringing the collective together and having the social network and social capital of everyone involved, which has been really, really powerful and is, what we tried to do those many years ago. And then and that's sort of more on the community DAO side, even though it's an investment vehicle, right? There's no token. It's basically the difference taking there. And then on the other side of it, on the more token side of it, I think what Index Group are doing is like, has been really impressive. They've had like an insane level of engagement in all of their governance processes. They sort of, by nature of what Index and DPI, and I think the Metaverse, MVI, these other indexes actually are, that as a product makes perfect sense to sort of be decentralized. And Index Group being the overall platform that sort of governs these indexes, the fees that might stop them, and what new ones get added, etc. They've had amazing community engagement and an amazing level of governance. So I think, on the token side, definitely Index Group is someone that, FireEyes has worked sort of adjacent to, not directly with, but is really exciting. And then Metacartel Ventures on the traditional DAO side. Actually, another example as well, which sits on the more community side, is actually what the space is here. And so I don't know, maybe I can do a tour, right, while we're on it. So, this is a physical space that we're all hanging out in New Zealand. This is like offices here, and then down here we have the lights aren't on at the moment, but this is like a big warehouse, and we have like 100 people through here. Just last week as a kind of tech week, which is a big sort of events series around New Zealand, and it basically just talking about. Actually it was called DeFi and DAOs 2 years on, because 2 years ago we did a presentation about DeFi when the total market cap was 600 mil, and now 2 years on it's 60 bill. And so it was like, yeah. And so that was like the point of the event, was basically like, I hope you came last time. You would have had like really great context. But no, and so this space in general was set up by a collective called Tyan, TYAN. And that's a group of us that are 20 odd people that are based here in Christchurch. And, maybe 3, 4, 5 of us are sort of like Web3 native and are really involved in the space. And the other 15 are just like normal friends that we've had for 10 years, right? They're sort of mechanics and plasterers and, electricians, and have normal jobs and have a little bit of exposure to crypto and like a knowledge and like a financial sense. But for the most part, are just friends. We're all sort of here hanging out. But sort of taking how far we are down a rabbit hole, and actually being able to, of DAOs, and being able to extrapolate that to a group of friends and thinking, the way that a co-op works is too big and too heavy for a group of friends, right? The way that a company works, there's so much liability, and where's it all going? Too complicated. And so instead, just spinning up a DAO, and each of us putting in $20 a week, and this DAO sort of continually just stack money. And then being able to get a place like this, right, and have a physical location where every weekend we can all hang out, right, where we can host art events, we can host skate events, we can host crypto events, and actually just have a location to really build Christchurch culture and do some amazing things out of. And so that was, a collective started by 3 or 4 of us, but has 20 friends that are sort of all engaged, and we coordinate. It's not like on-chain voting. On-chain voting doesn't matter. We all know each other. And so we sit down once a month and say, right, these are the 5 decisions. Who's going to own this? We'll put a group of people together that'll focus on this. These people need to make proposals to get paid for this, and actually just discuss everything. But it's just a way to sort of manage that capital in a transparent, community first way.
Wow, that is really exciting. It's something I've never considered before in terms of onboarding, I guess, people to crypto in the Web3 world, because obviously the dominant narrative is number go up. Hearing that story, it's makes me really excited about the opportunity that we have just with organic communities as bridges to the space, and then also how that flows on and colors people's experience, because people talk about first mover advantage in a kind of commercial context, but I am starting to think more and more about first mover advantage with kind of narratives and knowledge in my mind, because my awareness is growing about what my thoughts are and how they got there. And just that a lot of, so for example, I'm in Kernel at the moment, which kind of sprung out of Gitcoin. And I have a real public goods foundation as my kind of Web3 experience. And because of my exposure in Kernel, I basically almost experience a lot of my kind of crypto Web3 life through that lens. And I can't even, I can't deny that a part of it is the first mover advantage that kind of Kernel had in my mind. And so I wonder how that as an opportunity will, color the experience that lots of, many, many different people have, because community is so fundamental to just being.
Totally. And I think it's community first mover advantage. Yeah. If you're the first community, then the first 100 people that walk in the door and then are looking at all the different community options say, oh, this is a community focused on public goods funding, or this is a community focused on index products, or this is a community focused on investing as a collective, or whatever it is, whatever community you find. If you're the only one, or there's only 2 that exist, and in 10 years' time there's going to be 200 that exist, just by being the one that exists now, you're actually going to pull in so many more interesting people. And those first hyper-driven individuals that have already found themselves down this rabbit hole, which is going to take the general population a couple of years, to sort of get to the same level. And I think that's interesting as well about just DAOs in general. And that was a big idea about the sort of collective here. Is it actually just normalizing? It's like when we had the big event and we had a bunch of 20 of the guys and girls here that are sort of part of the DAO, and then we had 100 other people that were sort of just participants at this event, and you could see this really funny interaction where these are all again pretty normal people that are part of the DAO, and then one of these people that were attending the crypto event come and talk to them and be like, oh, you're part of the DAO, that's amazing, what's it like, what's going on? And that was the learning point from the event, was actually we need to inform us about how to have that conversation and how to be part of the DAO, because they've just seen it as this friend group. But it's pretty amazing to be able to see people that are a little bit switched on or understanding of what DAOs are, and just to be like, yeah, we're a DAO. We coordinate our capital and we do fun things, and we focused on empowering all of us and bringing a level of everyone has a base level of their needs met, and then beyond that, the DAO can empower everyone beyond that, and just sort of normalizing that idea, because I think it will be something where in a couple of years' time, everyone and their dog would have heard of a DAO for different communities or collectives or whatever it is.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for that point, because that will definitely stick with me. This idea that sometimes when you're in the rabbit hole, you don't realize how deep in you are, and actually kind of when you can see the sky again, there's a lot more opportunity to bring a lot more people into the space. But it's not even really, it's not kind of like, you're not really dragging people into the rabbit hole, are you? Because they're fine to be where they are. And DAOs are kind of an amazing vehicle in that sense that can kind of move between worlds. I guess the intention is like whatever you place on it, as opposed to something that's more economic or commercial in nature.
And totally. And just being able to define them in whatever way. There might be a group of friends that want to be less nice than us, and they're like, or want to focus less on the community and more on like the financial element. And it's a group of 10, and they all put in $10 a week. And then as the DAO buys different, decentralized pieces of property, or buys, pieces of random crypto tokens they want to hold, and they can just use that as an investment vehicle. But to think about from grants giving, friend-based grant-giving organization to friend-based, investment organization, and all of the overlap in between. It's just a design space for sort of like physical communities to actually, financially empower themselves. Like just that idea of like, don't do business with your friends, I think is such a toxic concept. It's like, oh yeah, I should only do business with people that I dislike, because anytime that money comes up, I'm going to choose the money over my friend. That's a concept that's existed for a really short amount of time in human evolution, and it's only because we sort of have hyper driven down capitalism that's even still considered. You should be doing business with friends. You should be able to have those trust-based relationships that even once you turn them transactional, it's not that they're transactional in nature. There's still trust in nature. It's just there's transactions going on between them. Yeah, and it's actually existed for a long time. Like the idea of a co-op is, and certainly preloading co-ops or companies existing a couple hundred years ago, they totally existed. People just coordinated capital in a really like transparent way around, okay, we're a group of people and we want this to happen. Everyone put in money, make this happen. But we've sort of forgotten that with recent history. And it's like, the only way that you should do it is you should put money together and then try and make more money.
Yes.
And it's like, actually, you can just solve a problem. Just put the money together to make something happen that you all want to happen. And that's as impactful. It doesn't need to be this big profit-hungry machine. It can instead just be a collective of people looking to solve anything or do anything. But we've sort of, really disregarded that over like recent history.
Yeah. Funny. Wow. This is a real revelation for me. I feel like every time I learn about like a different part of crypto or Web3 or what's happening, it like completely undoes something that I have been exposed to over decades in society, and it just makes me stop and think, wait, what? Like we've been told this, and I feel like this constant theme of like what is old is becoming new again. So like you said, like the idea of co-ops is like a really organic thing. Like if you put a group of people together, like in any context, like a co-op will basically happen. And just this idea of getting out of being so, I guess it's like outcome or destination driven, and more just kind of acknowledging that having a vehicle to exist, like just to exist is enough. We don't have to be like going anywhere. But just kind of being able to coordinate at all just to exist without, And
existing, I think existing is one thing, but like existing in a direction that you want to exist, it doesn't need to be this like, and just the fact, I think we were actually talking last night about like, digital value, and how like, my take is that like all video games are going to be some level of monetized over the next couple of years. And my friend was back and saying like, oh, that just means people in like, third world countries will just end up playing the video games like Axie Infinity. I don't know if you've seen any examples there where, these people all over the world in like, worse off countries that are basically just playing Axie Infinity all day to earn the rewards, because then someone else wants to buy the rewards and then they sell them off and make money from it. And actually that idea is going to be like the digital empowerment of the world. I think that's how like a lot of people get lifted up from poverty, is it's a bunch of degenerates all over the world that are addicted to playing video games. And, there's people that have time and have, their time is valued really lowly. And so then they can just use that to work in a digital platform. And, some of that might be video games, but also like we're talking about the proposal farming, right? And contributing to those ideas there. And the digital landscape just becomes so much more valuable than the physical landscape. And then it's just about which direction do you want to point yourself, right? And which community do you want to get involved in? And sure, like not everyone is going to want to get involved in community, but everyone's already involved in work. Everyone already goes to work for 40 hours a week. Most of people are not following their passion, right? Are not doing that thing for 40 hours that they really love. And so thinking about how we can monetize other parts of our existence and other parts of our communities and our lives, so that actually your work doesn't need to be this thing that you do for 80% of your time that you really don't enjoy. And instead, can be something that you do for less, or the other parts of your life are just become monetized in a slightly different way, which people often have a real pushback to. Are like, oh, well, I don't want my life being monetized in that way, or I don't want video games being monetized, or I don't want me posting on social media be monetized. It's like you've got to be pretty damn privileged to say that you don't want those things monetized. You've either got unlimited money or you just pure have your passion in your work. Because for the most part, if people could work a little bit less and have other verticals of their life slightly more monetized, that would, be pretty awesome. People can sort of follow their passion more and be more pure with what they're doing.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting.
I think that I'm really looking forward to that. I think that when you just like talked about privilege, I think it's really an interesting exercise, like an interesting thought exercise to like think about how you would feel about something. I find myself doing this a lot as well lately, in kind of crypto and especially kernel. And then like just see what comes up and see like how confronting it is to you and like what ideas and paradigms it's kind of flushing out for you. Because if you have a problem with something like people being able to monetize playing video games in developing countries where they have nothing but time, but they don't have opportunities, and they certainly can't play the credentialing and signaling games like maybe you and I can, what are you holding on to?
Yeah. And why would you not want it to happen? And whether it's like, I think video games is the example that we were shitposting on last night, but I think there's 100 other examples of like participating in this digital, if we run a DAO focus on picking up rubbish, around New Zealand, we put in a bunch of money to it. There's a couple of hundred people with a couple of $100,000. And then anytime, anyone can send a photo of a pile of rubbish that's in the DAO. And then anytime anyone validates that that's cleaned up, then they get a payment or whatever it is, right? That's just ABC example. But there's actually a validation process that needs to go there. Looking, has the place been updated? Has the place been cleaned? Checking the first photo against the second photo. That process being done by someone not necessarily in the DAO, but like an external service providing DAO, that only does validation of rubbish cleaning. That is, a collective based somewhere overseas. That's awesome. And that's actually where value should come from. And I think where value will end up sitting in the future is just a lot more. All of those countries will just onboard through digital value, not through physical. It's too late to get into the manufacturing game, right? We've already, there's already been a baseline manufacturing that's taken place. And actually what's happened over the past couple of years is that larger Western countries are walking back their overseas, production and manufacturing because they're worried about, COVID or, borders closing, whatever. And so I think the manufacturing gate's closed. So it's like, well, what are you going to do as a developing country? Where's your revenue going to come from? And I really think it is this like digital world and being able to like participate in some level of a metaverse. And that's how, the value accrual happens for those populations.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to two things, which is like the flattening of the world, even more so. And I guess like the flattening in alignment with, like you said, like a more authentic expression of who people are as individuals and not as kind of this idea of labor, maybe. And I feel like you must have a running notebook of just like a million DAO ideas, like that rubbish cleanup one. Like, do you have a notes app or something just like full of those?
I mean, I definitely have in the past. I think it's funny even like thinking about, different DAOs that are starting to exist now, and actually conversations that were taking place 1, 2, 3 years ago. And actually that like, that's part of only having 24 hours in a day and being, really far down a rabbit hole with a handful of other people. Is that often I describe it as like skipping stones. Often I feel like we'll have a conversation and we'll skip over 3 different ideas. We're actually thinking about the ocean under each of those skips. There's like 15 years of academic research that's going to go into, all of these different categories. And we're just sort of sitting on the beach having a few beers, like skipping stones, which is totally reality. And like, there's DAOs that already that we've discussed in depth and, have like Figma boards describing. And then, someone comes out on Twitter and is like, oh, we're doing this. We're doing DAO. And it's like, that's not a feeling of like, oh, that was my DAO idea. It's like, oh, good. Like, we were right. We talked about it. We were right. Great. It's happening now. And I think like that's part of the sort of decentralized power, decentralized, whatever the governance idea in general, is that it's not about holding on to that like whatever reputation or notoriety or sort of clout associated with like, oh, I came up with that idea. It's like same with the FireEyes in general. It's like what we want to do is actually put the ideas on the table and give people the building blocks and the facilitation, because we just can't own all of these outcomes. And not just us, there's countless other people that are, as far down the rabbit hole. But we just, all of those people are more focused on building the tools or being the one providing the proposals or talking to teams, and they can't be the one to build all these things out. I think MetaClan is a really good example of that. So MetaClan was meant to be like an esports DAO that we first started in 2019 and got some people into it and did a few competitions and sort of like a breeding program with Axie Infinity. And then it got taken over by YGG, which is not the exact name for, but YGG is the tag. And that's sort of basically a bigger version of it, right? It's an esports DAO focused on Web3 native video games and sort of how to monetize them and how to build communities around them. And that's, MetaClan has turned into, all the members from MetaClan have been given the opportunity to join YGG. And like that process, I think will continue to happen where there's just not enough people to own things. As soon as, you throw the dartboard and everyone goes around and goes, oh my God, that's an amazing idea. And then you kick it off, but then you get distracted by 100 other things. And then someone else actually picks it up and runs with it and turns it into something, much bigger.
Yeah. Something I just thought of when you were talking about video games just then, it's like this idea of kind of re-involving the youth and kind of valuing their contribution to the world, and DAOs being like a mechanism where again, when we're talking about people on the fringes, we exclude a lot of people based on their age at both ends of the spectrum. And but that's something I'm excited about. Is that something that you can kind of think about or see already?
Definitely. I mean, and like personally, I feel like super passionate about, like, so we have this meetup every month in Christchurch, and at the bottom of the market there's like 5 people there, and now there's like 100 people there every time because the numbers going up. But like it's always really interesting looking at sort of like, there's always a couple of new members every time that are like in their 40s, 50s, but obviously have some money and are like, oh well, now I'm investing in cryptocurrency, go to the meetup. And then there's 17-year-olds who are like screaming in my ear about Shiba Inu random dog coins on the internet. And I'm like, oh my God, like, first of all, stop asking me about shitcoins to buy, because I'm just going to walk away and roast you. That's definitely a young person thing. But, just being way more pointed, in terms of my time and energy, being way more pointed towards the younger generation, because often actually the 40, 50-year-old is going to be like much more, have their shit together, know what questions they want to ask, know what they want to get out of it. And it's less of a stressful conversation, right? Versus a 17-year-old who's like, I've got this idea and I want to do this, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, like, just chill us. But directing energy there is just way more efficient, because these are the people that eat it up naturally. Describing an online money that's validated by computers, that's trustless and all over the internet, to someone who's above the age of 30, unless they're a real tech nerd, it's just not going to land that well. But thinking about a group of under 20, less than 20-year-olds or whatever, less than 25-year-olds who have only been brought up on the internet, and actually then that's been massively accelerated by 2 years of never leaving your house and only sitting online and scrolling TikToks and like playing video games or whatever young people are doing. And so these people are already hyper native to the idea that currency is an online thing that you trade around and buy things and sell things. That is all it is to them. It's not this big capitalistic machine where there was penny stocks, and then there was big stocks, and there was a tech boom, and then there was assets that go up, and I have property and you don't have property, and all these big financial games that these people are thinking about were actually all of them made up, as far as I'm concerned. The whole thing's the dollar's a Ponzi scheme as much as Bitcoin's a Ponzi scheme. It's all, nothing's made up. And I mean, everything's made up. And so, that younger generation, I think, are really going to appreciate that and just be like, yes, everything is made up. And this seems like a good way to coordinate made up money. So perfect. Let's do that. And like that really will be, I think, what takes us. And again, a couple of years ago, I would have been a lot more like, oh, maybe it's going to continue to grow and eventually we'll get there. Now I'm like, especially with COVID and sort of the digitization of the world through that, I think like, I'm now over the line that over the next very short time, a couple of years, the idea of a DAO and the idea of digitally coordinating your community, no matter what that community is, if it's about TikTok DAO, or it's a clean up rubbish DAO, or it's, I have a local community in Christchurch who want to do cool shit DAO, or whatever it is, like I think these will like eat the world, because a younger generation are just like, oh, we can just coordinate money this way and no one can stop us.
Yeah.
Great. Done. Click a button.
I almost think we've been convinced to like whatever is the governance, like the innate like governance ability in ourselves has like atrophied, because we've just they said outsource it to us, and we're like, okay, we'll outsource it to you. But actually, when you're like in the space and you see how like a bottom up or grassroots community works. Like it's very natural and for people just to participate and to for that to kind of evolve organically.
And it really is just like that's how humans are supposed to coordinate.
Yes,
Like it's
yes,
not supposed to be like a 5,000 person organization where everyone's on $15 and like you have a board meeting which then gets disseminated to 6 core managers that disseminate that to another 600 people. It's like you're not going to care about anything. How are you going to care about the work that you're doing or how much revenue the company makes or how much impact it has? Literally nothing you're going to give a shit about.
totally.
Versus actually, smaller communities. But I think the idea of a DAO in a more community sense, again, token DAO versus community DAO, but a more community DAO having like hundreds of thousands of members on it, it's not going to happen, right? Or if it will, it'll just be so overarching, and that'll be a higher level DAO that will then dissipate, put out money and orders or direction to different smaller working groups, right, and smaller DAOs that sit below it. Because trying to coordinate people with that many groups and with that many people, it's just impossible.
Yeah,
there's so many conflicting ideas.
Yeah, I actually think that like a lot of good things could happen if we just had a mechanism to mobilize like a few people, but it seems that we only have kind of a few types of tools in this world to coordinate people, and whether it's like the regulatory or administration costs make that not worthwhile. So that's really interesting to think about. And then also, yeah, I'm just excited when people aren't living for the weekend, because like every day they're working on stuff that they want to be working. They're like participating all over the place, but that's because we are not one vertical. I think something I struggle with is just like picking that label and then being like, okay, this is me on LinkedIn forever. So I'm just like, peace LinkedIn, I'm out. So this is really cool, this idea that, yeah, I have lots of different parts to me. They're reflected in all these DAOs that I participate in, and that can change. Yeah, you can go in and out of DAOs, and I think that it's so organic and it makes sense, and it's kind of just like a more healthy way to exist, right?
Totally. And like plus 100 to the idea of like not living for the weekend. Like, I hope a younger generation through like digital empowerment or like, new automation or decentralized finance, being open with where money's flowing around the world, whatever it is out of these different things, that's something that we can really actually change in the world. Because again, existed for such a short, the depression happened, 100 years ago, and we were like, oh, okay, everyone needs jobs all the time or we're fucked, and maybe it was slightly before that. But when around those times when actually we decided that as an idea, and I just don't think it's relevant anymore. Anything that happened pre-internet, I think
Yes.
take with a whole bag of salt, because this is no longer relevant. You're working in a world that, sorry, I can actually just press 6 buttons on the internet, make a new YouTube video, and then get $40,000 in Patreon subscribers instantly. Sorry, virtual jobs are not going to cut it. I think like even on that idea of DAOifying like YouTube, it's a really interesting one that we talked about actually when we did the presentation here. There's this YouTuber, Jake Tran, and he's generally just talks about, like, the Asian dude who talks about like the politics of the world and sort of finance mechanisms of the world, and hasn't really covered any crypto. And then he started talking about like social tokens and like creator tokens. And I think, the idea of being able to buy someone's social token as soon as you meet them at the party, as a New Zealander, spooks the shit out of me. But realistically, you can check someone's Instagram and see how many likes they have and do the exact same thing. So I think it's just about monetizing those likes. That's one vertical that I think is interesting. But the actual other side of it that really gets me interested is like thinking about how content creators can DAOify their content,
Yes.
right? And whether like, like a podcast that's a DAO where like as being a guest, you get given a share, someone that listens to it 10 times, you get given a share if you contribute an idea or a question or whatever it is, you sort of get ownership over this thing. And I think podcasts is a slightly harder example, but as like YouTube, where like if you back a creator that has 100 subscribers, and then you really you put money into the DAO and you give them ideas, and you are really a partner in that journey, and then they get to 10 million subscribers and are making a shitload of revenue from that. Thinking how you can be involved in that journey as someone who watches the channel or who contributes comments or ideas or capital is like so game. It will change the world into a curation-based economy where why would you work a normal job, right? You would just sort of like browse YouTube and find the newest creators and then give them $10 and a couple of really good video titles, and the next week they've doubled their subscribers and you get to see the upside of that. Like that is like super exciting as
Totally.
well.
James, you have to hit up Mr. Beast. I'm pretty sure that he like tweeted something about that. And it was
Yeah, I think he did.
and I don't know if Mr. Beast knows about DAOs now, but someone has to tell him, and it has to be you.
Yeah, I think he did actually tweet about a DAO, like DAOs at some stage, or maybe it wasn't him. But yeah. I think that's more of a Cooper Trooper job. So FireEyes is made up of 4 people. So there's myself, Callum, based here in New Zealand, and then Lucas and Cooper, who are over in the States. And Cooper is like NFT LA ultra wizard. And so I will pass the Mr. Beast task. I'll sit here and nerd out on mechanisms.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, James. This was so much fun, and I'm so excited to. We'll have to do this again, and we'll just like maybe we could just like keep doing DAO updates, because I think that it is just such a fundamental part of this kind of world that we are in. And like I said, I think that we're only just starting to kind of see a few use cases, but I'm excited, when the kids get hold of it, and when it kind of DAOs are spinning out DAOs that are spinning out DAOs, what that looks like. So yeah,
Yep.
awesome. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this.
No, thank you so much too. Like it's as I say, like just awesome to connect with someone else in New Zealand that's like, drive. Anyone that has a .eth name in New Zealand, like if you're watching this, like reach out to both the two of us, because like there really is a few people. I think there's Nick Johnson who does ENS, who's based here in Christchurch, and then the two of us, and everyone else is like, I buy Bitcoin. It's a slightly different character set. So really great chatting.
Awesome. Okay. Cool. Thanks, James.